from West Virginia Public Broadcasting.
Support for the Legislature Today is provided by the following.
West Virginia University, online at wvu.edu. The High Technology Foundation, headquartered at the I-79 Technology Park in Fairmont, online at wvhtf.org.
At the legislature today, senators reconsider a vote that killed one of the Republican majority's legal reform bills. That bill now makes its way to the House. And a special report on the state of water infrastructure in southern West Virginia on the legislature today. Good evening, I'm Ashton Mara. Senate Bill 361 made its way to the House today. What had been a full repeal of the prevailing wage altogether is now just a scale back. And this compromise received an endorsement from U.S. Senator Joe Manchin. Liz McCormick reports.
The House chamber was packed with union workers, contractors, business owners, and others who were interested in seeing what the House would do with Senate Bill 361. After emotional debates over this bill on the Senate floor and a rally organized by Senator Jeff Kessler that saw over 1,000 protesters who were heavily against the bill, a compromise was found in the Senate that made what was originally a full repeal of the prevailing wage to only a partial repeal. In the House Government Organization Committee's public hearing, 25 people spoke to explain their feelings toward the controversial bill. However, many of the speakers were not fully against the bill, but for the compromise passed by the Senate. Robert Gribben is the president and owner of Graycon Construction in Weirton. He says the lowering of the prevailing wage would cost his business highly skilled workers.
The lowering of the prevailing wage, most likely we're going to lose a lot of these workers because they're going to go to the states surrounding us that do have a prevailing wage rate. Some of them will stay here and they'll work in private industry, but there's not going to be enough work to keep all of our West Virginians busy. A point that I want to really make here today is, what do we really want for the citizens of West Virginia? I'm against the bill, but I'm not against some kind of compromise. And I think we do have to reach compromise. But the main thing is, I talked to one of your colleagues, $14 to $16 an hour wages. Is that really what we want for the state of West Virginia?
Donald Gatewood, the president of American Energy Contractors in Huntington, says he was originally for a full repeal, but now is interested in the compromise offered by the Senate.
What the Senate has done with 361 in the amended version is it's a good compromise, because what it does is it takes prevailing wage and it should make it prevailing wage. It should turn it into the market wage, which has a lot of benefit to this state, and most importantly, not to either of my companies, but most importantly to the taxpayers of this state. And I think we all have a fiduciary responsibility in this room to make sure that the taxpayers in this state are paying fair costs for their construction work. This is not about cutting wages. I'm not at all for cutting wages. It's about letting the marketplace work. In the amended version, you'll hear two things today. One is you're going to hear about the thresholds that are in that version. I urge you to keep those thresholds where they're at. There's still a cost with prevailing wage, even at market rates, because of the administrative cost for the state. And the other thing is, please don't mess with the timing, because if we push this thing out further than July 1, the marketplace, the construction marketplace in West Virginia is going to suffer.
In a surprise visit, Senator Joe Manchin also spoke at the public hearing.
I think we all know that West Virginia has some of the best workers and the best workforce and the best reputation for workers in the country. We have some of the best contractors. And if you look at the history of wages and you look at the Davis-Bacon Wage Act, this is not a partisan issue. It's not Democrat and Republican. Davis and Bacon were both Republicans. The president that put it into force as far as nationwide, as far as the highway system, was President Eisenhower building the interstate system. So when you look at it, we're looking at how do we protect good wages, get jobs done and done correctly, and basically with the best quality of workers you can. How do you have contractors? These were all put in place to make sure that was protected. And basically you have a situation in West Virginia right now, which I would hope you would seize. You have an opportunity where you've heard labor and business talking and working together, wanting to find adjustments to be made to make this a better piece of legislation. They're willing to do that. Labor has gone so far as to put a threshold of $500,000. There's only 3 states in the nation that have a threshold that high. They've given you basically every opportunity to work within the highest levels to make sure that we can get jobs done. Don't put a burden on your municipalities or your state jobs as far as contracts we might have. The thing that I'm trying to tell you is seize the opportunity to put something together here that's good. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. You've got everybody wanting to sit down and work together and make something happen that's going to be good for West Virginia. It's going to be good for the working people of West Virginia, the contractors and business people of West Virginia, most importantly, the taxpayers getting the job done with local workers. I think that's what you have in front of you right now. I would hope you would seize that opportunity. God bless all of you. Don't let the toxic atmosphere of Washington permeate in West Virginia. We're better than this.
For West Virginia Public Broadcasting, I'm Liz McCormick in the House.
Senators reconsidered a bill today that would have capped the punitive damages awarded in a civil lawsuit and also given the state a portion of the award. Yesterday, 2 Republican senators voted against the measure, but today the results were quite different after a bipartisan amendment was proposed. Wyoming County Senator Daniel Hall voted against Senate Bill 421 yesterday so he could move to reconsider the vote today. The bill, as originally considered, would have capped the punitive damages a jury could award at 3 times compensatory damages won in the case, or $500,000, whichever is greater. It also included a provision to give 1/3 of any award over the $500,000 threshold to the state to deposit in the rainy day fund. Senator Chris Walters disagreed with that portion of the bill and voted against it. But Democratic Senator Corey Palumbo and Senate Judiciary Chair Charles Trump, a Republican, came up with a compromise overnight, which they presented to the full chamber today. Palumbo explained the amendment.
The amendment would adjust the cap in the current bill from 3 times compensatory damages to 4 times compensatory damages. It would remove the state from taking any share of a punitive damages award.
Trump rose to support his amendment.
It's been said by people far wiser than I that politics is the art of compromise. If there is art in it, I think sometimes the art is in knowing when to compromise and when not to. And it should have been within my radar that the bill, as it was engrossed yesterday, was giving some heartburn to the gentleman from the 17th, whose reputation for balance and fairness is well known and well deserved, both within this chamber and without. And I appreciate very much the gracious efforts of the gentleman from the 17th to continue working on this issue to find a compromise that would be acceptable to move West Virginia forward. I urge adoption of the amendment.
The changes were adopted and the bill approved 26-8, with only Democrats voting against it. Senators also approved a governor's bill that would eliminate some councils and boards that are no longer active, and a bill to allow restaurants to sell alcohol at 10 a.m. on Sundays, often referred to as the brunch bill. Debate was heated in an earlier Senate Finance Committee meeting as members discussed a bill proposed by the governor. House Bill 2213 would take $10 million from the state's infrastructure fund used on water and sewer construction and improvement projects and use it to balance the 2016 budget. Members of the House approved the bill Tuesday but amended it on the floor to say that a small portion of the funds provided to the Infrastructure Council would be set aside for projects that benefit veterans. Committee Counsel Melissa Lilly explained the Senate could not leave the bill as amended.
So it's council's opinion, one way or another, this bill is fatally flawed. That amendment's not reflected in the title. It's not really a complete sentence, and it doesn't direct any proceeds. So it would be the cleanest way to remove that provision. If we don't, we have to amend the bill in some other way, or it's technically deficient.
Senate Finance Chair Mike Hall said the committee substitute would take out the flawed language and return the bill to the original intent proposed by the governor. Senators Jeff Kessler and John Unger were not pleased with the ComSub. Both propose separate amendments, one to keep the language in, and the other to change it to dedicate the money to build a veterans nursing home in Raleigh County, a provision lawmakers approved last session without a funding source. Many senators spoke both for and against the proposals, but both amendments failed. Senator Kessler then spoke against the bill before the committee's final vote, explaining a vote yes would take money away from greatly needed infrastructure projects.
It's my first year on this committee, but I also know that there's two aspects to a budget: money in and money out. And all we're doing to balance this budget is cut money out. We've not, and we got a two-pronged duty as members of this committee to look at revenue and revenue enhancements. And we're cutting things that we know are extremely vital to the people we serve. And that's infrastructure. I can assure you there is a list of billions of dollars worth of projects that need to be fixed in this state, and we don't have the money to get it done. And we're just turning our back on that and say, well, let's get through this year, and it'll get better next year. And it'll get better next year, and it'll get better next year. But it doesn't seem to be getting any better, and the only thing that's getting worse is our infrastructure fund. So I think we need to reject this bill. I know it's going to create a hardship because it's going to send everybody scurrying around, well, how are we going to fill that hole? Well, maybe we'll be creative and start looking at some revenue enhancements, easy ones, that we can do to balance this budget and quit all this cutting that's hurting the people of this state. I urge a rejection of this bill, and let's start looking at the revenue side of the budget.
Kessler supports increasing the state's tobacco tax as one way to increase revenues. Former Senate Finance Committee Chair Roman Prezioso was frustrated with the long discussion about a bill he says is ultimately needed to balance the budget.
We were the majority party last year. I didn't see any intestinal fortitude to raise any taxes. You know, we could have put 1 cent on the sales tax. That would have got us $200 million. That would have been a tremendous help. $200 million last year, another $200 million this year. We wouldn't be here trying to balance in this budget. But I don't see any senators signing on to any tax bills. So what do? If you don't have the money that's going in, like the Senator from Marshall indicates, you can't make it go out. It's simple as that. It's a balancing act. The governor has worked diligently trying to put this budget together, and he's doing the best that he can. Nobody wants to take money from infrastructure. Nobody wants to take money from social programs. It takes a tremendous lot of time to sit down and look line item by line item and put this thing together, and at the end have a balanced budget. Yeah, we can posture ourselves for the next election, saying, yeah, we didn't raise taxes, oh, we had to cut social programs, and we had to cut veterans, and we had to cut infrastructure. We're going to all hear it in the election, and it's a bunch of bunk. You know, you got to do what you have to do.
Senators approved the bill on a roll call vote of 11-4. The bill will next go to the full Senate for a vote. We had another reminder this week of just how important clean water is. A special report next. First, here's a look at some of the bills introduced in the Senate today.
Among the bills introduced in the Senate today, Senate Bill 517 to exempt coal bed methane gas from the severance tax. Senate Bill 519 to enact enabling legislation for the Nonprofit Youth Organization Tax Exemption Support Amendment, passed by voters in November. The bill exempts from property tax certain properties owned by the Boy Scouts and sets forth permitted activities. The bill requires the organization to pay 4% of the net revenues that will be shared by tourism, Fayette County, and for education purposes in Fayette, Nicholas, Raleigh, and Summers counties. Senate Bill 522 to provide a source of revenue to promote travel and tourism out of increased liquor profits beginning July 1, 2015. Senate Bill 523, the governor's bill to provide limited immunity from prosecution for certain misdemeanor offenses for a person who seeks emergency medical assistance for someone who is experiencing a drug or alcohol overdose. Senate Bill 524 to require that all higher education institutions in the state award credit to transfer students for similar courses completed at a different institution. Up for passage in the Senate tomorrow, Senate Bill 316 to define a veteran-owned business and make those businesses exempt from certain fees to the Secretary of State's office. Senate Bill 384 to permit the sale of wine by a wine specialty shop in a county that is not elected to permit the sale of wine or alcoholic beverages. Senate Bill 415 adding one judge to certain circuits. These additional judges are allocated based upon the West Virginia Circuit Judge Workload Study conducted by the State Justice Institute of the National Center for State Courts. And House Bill 2010 to require Supreme Court justices, circuit court judges, family court judges, and magistrates be elected on a nonpartisan basis. Among the bills on second reading, Senate Bill 30 permitting shared animal ownership to consume raw milk. The bill requires an owner to sign a written document acknowledging the inherent dangers of consuming raw milk. Senate Bill 350 to include utility workers among those other workers for whom protections are established. Utility workers includes those employed on interstate pipelines. Senate Bill 435 to create the West Virginia Sheriff's Professional Standards Bureau to provide standardization and uniformity of services of the sheriff's offices throughout the state and promote multi-county cooperation. And House Bill 2008 to provide for a performance and efficiency audit of the Division of Highways.
Days after a train wrecked in Fayette County, life is slowly returning to normal for residents there. Water has been restored to customers in Montgomery and the surrounding areas who lost their service after reports that oil had leaked into the Kanawha River. That accident and subsequent state of emergency were just another reminder of how precious the resource is. But some residents of southern West Virginia are reminded of that fact on a daily basis. Jessica Lilly reports.
A coal miner's daughter, Betty Younger, grew up in McDowell County and remembers a very different community during the 1950s. Younger sits on her front porch, which sits close to Route 52, a road busy with coal trucks. She reminisces about her days in the Kyle coal camp.
It was fun times for us. I mean, the community was plentiful because there were so many children around, and it was just a fun time for school and all. We all rode the school buses together, and it was just a big community of happiness. Every neighbor looked out for each other, and it was such a difference then than it is now.
Like so many coal-dependent communities, McDowell has suffered the boom and bust of the industry and a sharp population decline. In the 1950s, there were more than 100,000 people. Today, less than 20,000 remain in the county.
This part of McDowell County is looked upon like, there's what's here? Well, I mean, there's nothing here. No one wants to come back here to stay. They come back to visit, but no one wants to come here and back to really to live in certain sections of McDowell County. We just don't have like we should, like we once had. And so it's I don't know, but it's home. And I still love it because it's where I was born and reared here, so I still love it. It'll always be my home. It'll always be my home.
Younger has lived in this home in Elkhorn for about 6 years. There have been so many issues with the water, she just assumes not to drink it and says she rarely uses it for cooking. But the quality of the water is the least of her worries.
We never know when we're not going to have water. It's just, day to day. We keep jugs filled. For every jug that we get, gallon jugs of water and juices that we buy, the majority of us have porches and our basement, those that have basement, we have water jugs filled to capacity because we never know when we're not going to have water.
And that's the story for several communities in the region. While winter months can be particularly hard because of freezing pipes, water outages could happen in places like Elkhorn, Keystone, or North Fork any time of the year.
Sometimes the water is off for now it's off for 3 or 4 days, and we don't have access to water like other places do, and because of the pipes they're so old, and so they have to be replaced. But in the meantime, people are they're suffering because you have to get up. You need water to get up to get ready for work in the morning. To drink water, you have to go out and buy water out of your pocket now because the water system is not flowing like it should.
This past summer, a project that residents have been hearing about for years finally broke ground. Phase 1 of what's being called the Elkhorn Water Project. When all 3 phases are complete, the project will replace the system that Younger and other residents currently rely on. Phase 1 will replace a leaky, rusty tank that is believed to date back to the 1940s, set up by coal companies of that day. Younger's house sits just beyond the Phase 1 project. But like so many folks in the region, she's thankful for what she does have. To Younger and other folks, it's a way of life.
I try not to complain, and then I just, just ask the Lord to bless us and keep us, that we have water when we need water.
Our ambition and our goal is to provide as much clean water as we can for every citizen of McDowell County.
That's Eldon Green, Assistant Director of McDowell County Public Service District, after the groundbreaking ceremony last year.
We are very grateful for how that through the slow-moving bureaucratic process of the government, we're finally seeing this good thing happen in our county today.
Green is proud to say the district started out with 500 customers in 1990 and has more than 3,000 customers today.
There's a crumbling, decaying, almost non-existent water system in the area, and not even all of our customers or households have that public water. Some have springs and wells. But as with any rural community where the major industry has come and gone, we face negative things. We face low incomes. We face dilapidated housing. And it's just been a terrible, terrible struggle.
Phase 1 will bring water to Elkhorn, Mayberry, and Switchback. The McDowell County PSD is working to find funding for several other projects like this one throughout the county. The Big Sandy Roderfield extension will bring clean water to Green's own home. He currently has a deep well.
I have a water treatment system personally that is salt-based, and they say over the long term that's not good. But we're thankful for what we have.
The first phase of the project was funded by grants and loans from the United States Department of Agriculture, Rural Development. For West Virginia Public Broadcasting, I'm Jessica Lilly in Elkhorn.
Here's a look at some of the bills introduced in the House today.
Among the bills introduced in the House today, House Bill 2824 to require the instruction in penmanship and writing in cursive in all public, private, parochial, and denominational schools located in the state. House Bill 2825 to require the Department of Health and Human Resources to review rates it pays to care providers and to increase direct care rates to compensate for an increase in the state's minimum wage. House Bill 2826 to require the Commissioner of the Division of Highways to approve points of access to and from state highways to commercial parking lots. Among the bills up for passage in the House tomorrow, Senate Bill 255, the governor's bill to eliminate boards, councils, task forces, commissions, and committees that are unnecessary, inactive, or redundant. House Bill 2702 to redefine the service personnel class titles of early childhood classroom assistant teachers to smooth the transition of former early childhood aides to this new classification of school service personnel. Among the bills on second reading, Senate Bill 302 to add the West Virginia Municipal Police Officers and Firefighters Retirement System to the definition of retirement plan as it relates to disqualification for public retirement plan benefits. House Bill 2139 to restart expired provisions that allow retired teachers to be employed as substitutes in areas of critical need beyond the 140-day post-retirement employment limit. House Bill 2187 to allow government buildings to display the American national motto, "In God We Trust." Cost associated with the display may be paid for with any private donations, gifts, grants, or bequests. House Bill 2598 to ensure that teachers of students with disabilities receive complete information about the school's plan for accommodating the child's disabilities. House Bill 2669 to eliminate the statutory requirements for tuberculosis testing for school children and school personnel who are at low risk for tuberculosis. This type of testing is no longer recommended, and the cost of conducting the test is unjustified by the results. There's never been an active case of tuberculosis discovered through this testing. There's a public hearing tomorrow on House Bill 2752 to deregulate persons who perform work on heating, ventilating, and cooling systems and fire dampers. The hearing is Friday morning at 7:30 in the Government Organization Committee room.
This has been the Legislature Today. Tomorrow, Senator David Seipolt returns to discuss the bill to create charter schools in the state. As chair of the Senate Education Committee, Senator Seipolt has taken the lead on the measure. He'll give us the details about how charter schools would be implemented if passed by the House and Senate and signed by the governor. I'm Ashton Mara. Thanks for joining us. Good night.
Support for the Legislature Today is provided by the following.
West Virginia University, online at wvu.edu. The High Technology Foundation, headquartered at the I-79 Technology Park in Fairmont, online at wvhtf.org.